What makes a perfect intro for a video game? That is quite literally a multi-million-dollar question, because those first few minutes can make or break a game's success. Where's the balance between showing the player a cool story versus being a hard-to-follow exposition dump? Should you prioritize teaching them the game's mechanics, or let them figure it out as time goes on? Or do you just forego all of that, throw them into the game without any context whatsoever, and let the world design draw them in? A good first impression keeps players around and generates a positive word of mouth, which can lead to more sales, while a mediocre start leads to a low completion rate, a poor word of mouth, and possibly even a refund. I remember when Starfield first came out, there were tweets and articles that were like, this game gets really good 12 hours into it, just power through it, or New Game Plus is when you really start to enjoy Starfield. Yeah, no, how about a game that's good from the start? So today I want to go over a bunch of intros that I consider to be flawless. There will be spoilers for the first hour of various games, but nothing beyond that. Also, hi, my name is freaking Nick, and the PSA for today is that your mileage may vary, we may not see eye to eye on some of these, and there may be a few games that I did not mention that you like. So feel free to discuss them in the comments without being too mean to me, thank you. To keep with the theme of this video, I want to start strong with a recent release called Clair Obscur Expedition 33, because holy hot damn, this game's intro blew me away. It all starts with a shot of the Eiffel Tower, except it's melted and deformed, and the world has that thing going on that fantasy worlds do, where they have floating rock fragments in the air to show you that something is wrong, and the laws of nature aren't applying normally right now. It then cuts to a giant woman in front of a giant monolith, with an illuminated number 34 painted on it. All of this while this banger plays in the background. Straight off rip, we're dragged in by beautifully striking images that give us more questions than answers. Okay, so it's in a Parisian city, but why is it destroyed? Why is a landlocked city in the middle of the ocean? What is the significance of the number 34? And who is she and why is she so big? Speaking of beautifully striking images, we're then introduced to Gustav, who is staring at the 34 from a distance. He looks a bit melancholy and defeated as he picks up a rock and half-heartedly throws it towards the woman. Then the camera pans to a rose lying on a nearby bench, and we hear the first line of dialogue uttered by a girl named Maëlle.
If you're gonna give someone flowers, you should probably do it before they wither and die.
What, the flower? Or Sophie?
Ooh, dark. Sophie would approve.
Once again, you are being eased into this world with a little bit of details, but more questions than answers. So there's a Sophie in the picture, and she's gonna die soon, and Daredevil and Shadowheart are making jokes about her imminent death. But how do they know that Sophie is going to die, and why are they making jokes about it? Instead of explaining everything to you, they ultimately make it your responsibility to pay attention and piece the details together before the big event happens. Which, don't worry, the big event is coming. Several things are touched on in the conversation between Gustav and Maëlle. Gustav and Sophie dated but broke up years ago. Sophie will die at sunset in an event known as the Gommage. The giant woman across the sea is the paintress, and Gustav hates her. There is an expedition that is about to embark that Gustav and Maëlle are a part of. Every expedition until now has failed. Gustav meets up with Sophie, and she asks him to walk her to the harbor where people are celebrating the Gommage. Several people, Sophie included, have flowers around their necks. Flower petals litter the ravaged streets of Lumiere, which is the name of the city, and it becomes increasingly clear that Sophie and Gustav love each other, but they drifted apart because they disagree on how they view the Gommage. Gustav is hurt and sad, and there's this very tangible anger lying just below the surface, but Sophie has a sense of apathy about everything. She knows that she's going to die, and she's accepted it. Conversations with people on the way to the harbor reveal that far more people are like Sophie than Gustav. In fact, there's even a bit of hostility towards people who support the expeditions. The way that these two groups of people foil each other feels like the way revolutions fail to materialize. Everybody wants the world to change for the better, but very few people want to make the sacrifices necessary for it to happen. So instead, the majority of the people in Lumiere tend to get apathetic and just it is what it is their way through life. After spending the afternoon together, the sun starts to set and the Gommage happens. The paintress awakens, erases the number 34, and paints on a new number 33. At first, things are still, but then all those who have flowers around their necks start disintegrating. You see couples dissolve. A mother disappears while holding her daughter's hand. And finally, Sophie disappears from Gustav's grasp. This is a hauntingly beautiful spectacle that reveals so much about this world. The numbers are a countdown and they eliminate everybody who is of that age, meaning that if this number gets too low, that is the end of humanity. This has been going on for quite some time, as it has now become the way of life for the citizens of Lumiere. They've become so desensitized to getting Thanos snapped and so accepting of it that they throw a party every year to send the doomed off with a bang. Gustav touches on this later during the expedition when talking about how different it feels seeing people die versus seeing people get gommaged, even though they're effectively the same thing.
You know, that's the insidious thing about the gommage. It's predictable, almost gentle. It makes Lumiere complacent and accepting, but the gommage is equally violent, and death is just as final.
What really sells this gommage cutscene is Gustav's facial expressions. You can see him go from sad to desperate, and as he looks towards the paintress, that underlying anger and determination seep through. This introduction is so effective because while it does let you dip your toes into the mechanics of the game, it is way more interested in putting you in its world and getting you a vested emotional interest with Gustav and his motivations. I finished this cutscene and immediately wished I had let Gustav spend more time with Sophie and less time making her watch him get the shit beat out of him by a mime while I tried to learn how to parry. I was absolutely hooked by this intro and ended it fully on Gustav's side, ready to support him through thick and thin to do whatever it takes to get everybody back. I know this is a very standard thing that games do, where they establish stakes and drip feed you a narrative that you need to wrap your head around while they still teach you the game's mechanics, but I feel like Clair Obscur nails it quite unlike any other. But let's pivot into an intro that's more based around the concepts of hype moments and aura now.
They are rage, brutal, without mercy. But you will be worse. Rip and tear until it is done.
2016's Doom starts with the Doomslayer being unsealed from his coffin-like prison into a facility full of demons. You can tell 3 things about the protagonist right off the bat. 1, he's chained up. 2, he's ripped as hell. And 3, he's butt-ass naked. One demon notices the Doomslayer and advances towards him, to which the Slayer breaks his chains and kills it with one hand. He then breaks the other chain and picks up a gun. The game foregoes any tutorials at this point, because let's face it, Doom 2016 is not the first-person shooter you've ever played. After you've killed the demons, you get a tiny but crucial drop of information regarding the Slayer's imprisonment.
We have to contain this.
In this game, you play the role of the last resort, the existential threat to the existential threat, the enemy of the enemy, though not exactly a friend to anyone. Doom Guy was deemed so dangerous that those who depend on him felt the need to lock him away. Once you get all suited up, the game tries to treat you to some information about the facility, but Doom Guy's not interested in exposition. You pry a shotgun out of the cold, dead hands of this guy, and the game puts you to test regarding everything you've learned so far, which is just shooting and glory killing. Or in other words, rip and tear. While shorter and more actiony, this introductory sequence does a lot of things similar to Expedition 33. You're brought into an interesting world with enough context to keep you satisfied, but enough questions to keep you interested. Why are there demons in a scientific facility? What led you to being locked up and released? And why were you naked? Where Doom differs, however, is they rely a lot more on the gameplay to sell you on its premise, which works to its favor. The gameplay loop is simple, kinetic, and satisfying. If Expedition 33 had tried to teach you about gradient parries, Pictos, Lumina, and what each character class does, then its intro wouldn't have had that same punch. Likewise, if Doom had spent its time trying to get you emotionally invested in Doom Guy's point of view, this game too would have struggled to get off its feet. Instead, you know that the only thing the Doomslayer hates more than demons is not being able to tear demons apart, and that's good enough to get your buy-in. The intro ends with Mick Gordon's score coming up in a crescendo as director Hayden confirms that this was an intentional act that got out of control when suddenly...
Hey, you're finally awake.
Skyrim starts with you chained up, headed to an unknown fate. All you know about your crimes is that you were caught crossing the border. Which doesn't sound too bad. It's probably a misdemeanor and then they'll just send you back to your home country. Oh, never mind. One of the guys that you're with is a head insurrectionist against the Empire, so you're gonna die. In the first few minutes, you have a general idea of the world you've been thrust into. Skyrim is a heavily divided nation with a civil war, racial tensions, and a bunch of different factions that all hate each other's guts. The only thing that I'm not crazy about with Skyrim's intro is it comes to a screeching halt so you can design your character, but I digress. One guy tries to flee from the execution and gets turned into a pincushion, and then as the executioners are making a big ceremony out of everything, an ominous sound is heard.
What was that? It's nothing. Carry on.
They continue with their ceremony, and then this guy just goes.
For the love of Talos, shut up and let's get this over with.
So they chop his head off, and then it's your turn. But in the wildest coincidence in all of gaming, you were saved at the literal last second by a dragon appearing in Skyrim for the first time in centuries. In the ensuing pandemonium, you managed to escape into what I believe is one of the best video game tutorials of all time. The stakes feel high because you're running from a fucking dragon, so you almost don't think twice about how this is the game's tutorial. From looting to sneaking to healing to lockpicking to every kind of combat, Skyrim shows you pretty much everything you need in order to survive while actively moving you towards your next objective. Tamriel is also a world of factions, and you get quickly thrust into this when you're forced to choose between escaping with the Stormcloaks or the Imperials. So after about 10 or 15 minutes, you know about Skyrim's political turmoil, you've witnessed the resurgence of dragons who were considered only legends until now, and you have a basic understanding of the ins and outs of all the game's systems, and you're suddenly dropped into an open world where you can go literally wherever. This introduction serves as the start to your character's legend, and it truly feels that way. Before we get into the final great opening I want to talk about today, I want to bring special attention to a bunch of others that I think are great. There's this trope for a bunch of sequels where the game starts with basically a "yep, that's me" moment. Uncharted 2 probably executes this the best, dropping Nathan Drake in a train actively falling off a cliff. Dead Space 2 is another great use of this, where a necromorph outbreak occurs in the ship where Isaac is being held, and Mass Effect 2 starts with the ship you traveled in for the entire first game getting blown up along with several crew members that you thought you'd get to know over the course of the trilogy. It's a great way of raising the stakes and bringing you into the next entry at a running pace. I think Nier Automata is a fantastic game with a great first level that eases you into the combat, shows you just a smidge of what you're up against, and establishes the foundation of what this game is about. However, it did not make this list because if you die at any point during that first hour, you have to start the whole thing over, which kind of sucks. Batman Arkham Asylum immediately puts you in a state of unease because it starts with Batman having captured the Joker, and you take him on a long perp walk through Arkham Asylum, just wondering when it's all going to go wrong. Because the game is called Arkham Asylum, you know it takes place entirely in Arkham Asylum, and you are in Arkham Asylum, so you just know something's gonna happen, but you don't know when and you don't know how. And finally, I can't say enough good about games that just completely forego giving any exposition, and they use their world's openness as the invitation to a player. You've got that first instance of loading into a Minecraft world where everything just spawns in around you and you have to get your bearings, or the iconic instrumental swell leading up to this shot from The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is just... But the one that I'm going to talk about last, because you'll all kill me if I don't mention it, is The Last of Us. Also, I haven't been entirely truthful with you this video because this part is going to spoil the end of The Last of Us, because I feel like the end and the beginning are inseparable in the context of each other. The Last of Us starts from a place of innocence. You see Sarah, a young girl just trying to give her hardworking single dad a good birthday. The bond between her and Joel is established, and she ends up falling asleep and getting taken to bed. And then she wakes up to the end of the world. This is day 0 of the apocalypse. You're a vulnerable young girl trying to figure out what the hell is going on and where your dad is when you find him. You're then attacked by a feral neighbor, and suddenly, the world doesn't feel safe and innocent anymore. Sarah gets in the backseat of her Uncle Tommy's pickup truck, and you get a panoramic view of the collapse of society. You also get a good look at Joel's dark side as he refuses to allow Tommy to stop and help a family, and later he seems to just stop short of telling Tommy to run over people so they can get away. These moments stand in stark contrast with Sarah's innocent characterization and kind of makes you question what kind of person this good dad really is. You don't get too much time to think about that though, because the tension is suddenly punctuated with no longer afforded the protection of their vehicle, and with an injured Sarah, you now take control of Joel as he desperately attempts to carry his daughter to safety as she witnesses several lifetimes worth of horrors. Joel and Tommy get separated in the pandemonium, and as the infected start closing in on his heels, they're saved by a soldier. However, that soldier receives some orders that you, the player, are not privy to, but it's pretty obvious what he was ordered to do. Joel narrowly avoids getting perforated by the soldier, and as he's about to be executed, the soldier is taken out by Tommy. But Sarah wasn't as lucky. She bleeds out in Joel's arms and dies. The rest of the game takes place 20 years later, but this provides us with all the context we need to know about Joel. He was already shown to value the life of himself and his own above anyone else, and losing the person closest to him only made him more jaded towards anyone else. It also shows why, once he starts growing close to Ellie, he becomes so protective of her. And the end of this game is the perfect mirror to the beginning. In the start, you come from a place of innocence as you control Sarah, venturing into the hell that the world is becoming. Then, when you lose your ability to walk, you take control of Joel and carry Sarah towards her inevitable doom. At the end of the game, Joel saves Ellie and carries her away from that doom, and when you take control of Ellie after she wakes up from the anesthesia, you head towards a place of safety and relative innocence. I love this game's symmetry between the beginning and ending, and I think there are very few games that succeed in establishing emotional stakes at the start as well as The Last of Us did. So, what makes the perfect intro to a video game? Obviously, it's going to differ from person to person of what the concept of perfection is, but I think the most effective intros are the ones that manage to set the stage and the stakes without feeling like a chore or without overplaying their hand. Coming out of that first hour with a hunger to know what happens next or feeling triumphant after slaying legions of demons is far more important to me than coming out of it with a mastery of the game's mechanics or a perfect understanding of the world's societal structure and geopolitical circumstances. In an industry that is growing increasingly saturated and increasingly unsustainable, it is absolutely essential that game studios are able to make that first little bit of the game so much of a hook and so intriguing and get people talking about it. But I want to open up the conversation to you guys, and I want to know what you think. What are some of the games that you feel like nail that intro? What are some of the things that work and don't work? And what are some things that you think maybe I overlooked? I'd love to hear your thoughts, but that's it for me. My name is freaking Nick. I want to say thank you so much for watching these videos, and thank you for 25,000 subscribers. That is a concerning number of people who love to hear me yap while they're on the toilet, but I really hope I made that bathroom break or that lunch hour better for you. I hope you choose to click on the next video that the algorithm shoves in your faces of mine, but if you choose not to, that's totally fine too. I hope you have a good life, and above all else, I hope you're taking care of yourself. Goodbye.